Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So Bernie Sanders was on, what is it called? State of the Union yesterday. Well, Sunday. I did this once before, but he was on there Sunday. The interview wasn't bad. The interview was perfectly okay. There's a weirdness with him functioning in this way. I've heard Trump supporters say that Trump as a president looks nothing like Trump as a candidate. Now, that's to be expected. He can say whatever he wants on the campaign trail. He's held within certain governmental structures when he's in office. I'm feeling the same way about Sanders. So it's almost like, yes, as a candidate, he could say whatever he wants. These are the things I believe in. These are other things I espouse. He's an independent. That's the part. And maybe that's my own bias in this, because I look at him and say, well, he's not a Democrat, so why is he acting this way? But in every capacity, since the election, he has been functioning as a Democrat. Because he functions as a Democrat, watching him give a show like this, he's confronted with certain hypocrisies. Not necessarily his own hypocrisies, but more so they arise because of who he's functioning with. It's almost like if I say, yeah, dude, you're a wife beater. If I'm using that to tar you with, and you tell me that, well, yeah, but your best friend is a wife beater, that doesn't make me look all that good. I'm against wife beating in this situation, but I don't particularly like it in this situation. It's the way it feels. So when certain questions are being asked of him, and look, Jake Tapper actually did a pretty decent job in this interview. He was presenting him with certain questions that were revealing conflicts, I guess. Not necessarily in his story, but kind of the conflict that I'm mentioning now, where because of who you're affiliated with and who you're aligned with, you're almost held to the things that they themselves do just by virtue of your association with them. So let's take a look at the interview. Maybe I'm overblowing it, but let's see what goes on. And I'm gonna stop it every so often in order to discuss. So let's see him.
Joining me now to talk about this and much more is former Democratic presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So the North Koreans put out a statement denouncing what it called the Trump administration's, quote, maniacal military provocations, including the deployment of the aircraft carrier. During the campaign, you called North Korea the greatest threat to the U.S. How do you think President Trump has dealt with the crisis so far?
Well, the important point is how we go forward. It is a very complicated and difficult issue. You have a regime which in North Korea is isolated, which has put incredible resources into a nuclear and missile program while millions of its people over the years have starved to death. The key point here is that the United States must not act impulsively, and we must not act unilaterally. The key, I think, to this situation, and I think President Trump understands this, is dealing with China. China now receives about 80% of the imports of North Korea. They are virtually the only ally that North Korea has. And what China has got to understand is that they have got to put incredible pressure, work with the entire Asian community in telling North Korea that they have got to cease their efforts in developing intercontinental ballistic missiles and more nuclear weapons.
You know, I'm feeling that thing again that I get when I'm watching these. And it's like, I don't want to say they're lying to us. It's not that I think they're lying to us. I think it's just, there's a bias in news. It is. It's just like an amazing bias in news that there's certain information in certain contexts that it's unacknowledged. They don't bring it up. They don't mention it. Bernie Sanders is right here. And he's essentially making this case that China needs to talk to North Korea to get North Korea to stop making weapons. You need to stop them from that nuclear program. You need to get in line, China. Wouldn't the operative question be, well, wait a minute, why is North Korea trying to make nuclear weapons? Because Sanders is right. Everything in that government, for the most part, is dirt, poor. They have nothing. Many of the people who were defected from north to the south will be shocked at the metal and everything else that is in South Korea. The metal in South Korea is no more special or different than anywhere else. They just don't particularly see it where they are in that country. Why would a country do that? Why would a country that has nothing else, few, if any, resources, isolated from the world, why would they take time to build a nuclear weapon? Think about it from the perspective of the country. Don't think about it from your own perspective. The United States has just toppled one country after the other. Not just toppling one government after the other. Destroyed Libya, destroyed Iraq, has been fomenting a war with Iran for God knows how long, has been supporting terrorist regimes throughout the world. And when we fought the Korean War, if I'm not mistaken, we decimated like 20% of that population. Like, it's hard to put into context. From the perspective of North Korea, the United States has been fomenting anger over and over again. You already have a cultural history of which this country decimated that country. Certainly, you can see their perspective. The United States doesn't attack countries that have nuclear weapons. Meaning, if they had a bomb and the United States attacked, they could hit Japan or they could hit South Korea, both of which are interests of the United States. They look at a bomb as being their protection. They look at a bomb in the same way that Iran looks at a nuclear bomb. Iran full well understands that Israel and America cannot topple that government willy-nilly. You can't just strike a country that has a nuclear weapon in such a way. That country, to some degree, can defend themselves and he can bite back. Without that bomb, they can't bite back. You're not going to win a conventional war with the forces of the United States. You don't need to win a conventional war if you have a nuclear weapon. They're looking at the weapon itself as being a protective measure. That's why they're trying to build a bomb. I don't think it's because these people are crazy. It's not, these guys are just so loony. They're just not functioning in a way that a human being would typically function. That's not it at all. They're not crazy. They're responding to the pressures that are against them. I make no distinction of whether it's right or it's wrong. I'm making the point of it. It just is. It just is. It's why it's taking place. That's not the conversation that's had on news. News doesn't want to have that conversation. News, Jake Tapper, he wants to just talk about, hey, Bernie, what are you going to do about North Korea? Didn't you say North Korea was the greatest threat America could have? What about a little bit more context, Jake? Huh? What about a little bit more context?
I think China has the capability of doing that. So the partnership with China and other countries in that region is what we have got to focus on.
And as you note, President Trump has seemed to follow that basic idea that China is the key. After he met with Chinese President Xi, an editorial in a semi-official Chinese newspaper warned North Korea specifically that it must rein in its nuclear ambitions or risk losing vital Chinese trade. It wrote, quote, Chinese society will be willing to see the United Nations Security Council adopt severe restrictive measures that have never been seen before, such as restricting oil imports to the north. It seems to be something of a policy shift for China. Do you agree? And if so, do you think President Trump's policy of leading on China is the reason this is happening?
No, I think this policy shift on the part of China has been taking place for quite a while now. As I understand it, for example, China did not have a representative at the military parade in North Korea the other day. That says something. Just the other day, the plane trips between Beijing and North Korea were suspended. Not to mention that China is now cutting back on the importation of coal from North Korea, which is the major source of their foreign currency. But China has got to...
Yeah, Sanders didn't want to answer that one. He didn't want to answer that one. Don't get me wrong. What I mean is, yes, he answered it. But the answer to what Tapper's saying could be yes. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm making this point that if Trump is fomenting a war with North Korea, I severely doubt that China wants the United States in North Korea. Meaning, I don't think they want our troops there. I don't necessarily think they want us attacking that country. So, yeah, if they think he's crazy enough to actually start a war with them, would China be incentivized to tell North Korea, dude, you need to calm down. You need to calm down. I need you to bring it down a little bit. Yes. Yes, they would. Now, I'm not saying that what Donald Trump is doing is right. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about his very specific question. Are you saying that what Donald Trump is doing is essentially helping the situation by focusing on China? Now, the question is, can it be done in a different way? Yes. Do you need to try to foment a war to get these results? No. No. So don't misunderstand me on this. I'm just making a point that just from a basic bare bones way, if you're answering that question and it says, is what Trump is doing, as batshit crazy as it is, to threaten a war with North Korea, is that in any way incentivizing China to try to put a restraint on North Korea? Then yeah, if China doesn't want North Korea getting attacked, yes, I imagine China would do that. That is the incentive structure. Now, Sanders is incentivized to not answer in that way. He's a Democrat. Or at the very least, he's functioning as a Democrat. I honestly suspect, a lot of this, and a lot of the reason he's functioning as a Democrat has to do with him just being terrified of Donald Trump. I honestly do. If I would wager that he's made this calculus in his head of, it is better off to function with this team and attack him than it is to leave him in that office. That's what I think is taking place. So if I accidentally call him a Democrat, that's where that comes from. He's functioning as a Democrat. So the last thing he wants to say is, yes, what Trump is doing is, yes, that's having a positive effect. Because ultimately, just because it's having a positive effect doesn't necessarily mean what Trump is doing is right. It just means that it's having a positive effect. Minutia is not a good forum to try to make those distinctions. So he's probably better off just staying away from it at all, saying, no, what Trump is doing is not working. I'm just trying to give a little bit more context to the question. I don't think the answer of that question is, it's a little bit more nuanced than, yes, what he's doing is working. No, what he's doing is not working. It's, yes, what he's doing is somewhat batshit crazy, fomenting a war. Yes, because it is batshit crazy and because China would like to avoid XYZ, yes, they're putting pressure on North Korea. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Do a lot more. A lot more. They have got to be working with the United States, with Japan, with South Korea to make it very clear to North Korea that these policies cannot continue, or else there is going to be significant economic sanctions destroying that economy.
Destroying that economy? North Korea barely, they don't even have enough food to feed their people. What are you talking about? They're going to be economic sanctions if you don't. Why is he doing? Like, he's in this tough talk mode of, I'm puffing myself up and I'm going to have a go at North Korea and it's saying what? This is absurd to me. At no point are they having this kind of conversation of, well, wait a minute, are we doing anything to get them to do that? And is there another means of getting them to stop that particular behavior? That seems like the most sensible and sane conversation there is to have. He's talking about having crippling economic sanctions on a country that barely has an economy. Come on, Sanders.
You were one of the only members of Congress to come out opposed to the strike in Syria 2 Thursdays ago. You warned it could lead to a quagmire. Now, since that time, there have been no further U.S. strikes against the Syrian regime. President Trump said this week, quote, we're not going into Syria. Is it possible that that airstrike by the U.S. was a one-off?
Yeah, I'm rescinding the credit that I initially issued to Jake Tapper. Is it possible that the president's illegal strike against a sovereign nation in which he had no constitutional justification to do, no international justification to do, is it possible that him throwing a hissy fit and sending a bunch of missiles at another country is a one-off? So what if it's a one-off? What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? I don't understand why why is that even a question? Why is that a question? Hey, is it legal? That seems like an interesting question. Is it legal for the president of the United States to attack another country when we're not in threat and none of our interests are in threat? Is that legal behavior? That doesn't come up, unacknowledged. Not even if the president just did one strike on a country. Why is the president just doing one strike? Like, there's no strategy associated with it. The president wanted to get his rocks off one morning, so he had a Twitter fit and sent 49 missiles into another country. I don't understand why Jake Tapper thinks that's okay. Or at the very least, the way he asks this question is bizarre to me. Hey, it just looks like it's a one-off. Is it possible it's a one-off? So what? So what? What's the value of that question? Or what's the value of the answer to that question? It's ridiculous.
Well, here is the point. Jake, when we talk about national disasters, what is happening in Syria is almost beyond belief. You have a dictator there who appears prepared to destroy his entire country in order to hold on to his power and his wealth. 400,000 Syrians are dead, 10 million people displaced. They have detainment camps, massive torture. They bomb hospitals. This is a horrific regime. What our job there has got to, again, not act unilaterally. In this case, we have got to demand that Russia and Iran stop their efforts in supporting this horrific dictator. Assad has got to go. ISIS has got to be defeated. But I do not want to see the United States get sucked into perpetual warfare in the Middle East, see our men and women get killed, trillions of dollars being spent. We've been in Afghanistan now for over 15 years. We've been in Iraq for a very long time. I don't want to see us dragged into another war in Syria when kids in this country cannot afford to go to college, when our infrastructure is collapsing, when 28 million Americans have no health insurance. We have got to start paying attention to the needs back home, work with allies in the region. The war in Iraq was the worst blunder in the modern history of this country, precipitated mass instability. We cannot continue to make those mistakes. Countries around the world have got to work with us to address those crises.
So, Sanders, tell me, just so I'm understanding, 400,000 dead, 10 million displaced. He has massive torture camps, bombs hospitals. It is a horrific regime. Bush killed 1 million. Obama killed thousands. We had a torture regime also right on the coast of Guantanamo Bay. It was gulag. It wasn't illegal to have in the country, so we put it just off the coast because we also wanted to get access to it. We've tortured people to death in that gulag. So check, we have one of those. 10 million displaced. If we're not at 10 million, we're up there. We're up there. Iraq destroyed that region. Libya destroyed that region. It's one country after another. We've been paying terrorists to destabilize. Syria, how many people do you think left Syria? How many people do you think have gotten into boats to go across to Europe based upon the actions of what's taking place by our presidents? With an S. With an S. Yes, you can put it on Bush in the beginning. Obama toed the line and added Libya into the mix. Trump is clearly going to continue on with the rhetoric. He's upped the number of murders by 400%. Bombs hospitals. We just bombed a hospital. We just bombed a hospital. If I'm not mistaken, that bomb in Mosul killed 150-some people. And yes, a hospital was included in that. This is a horrific regime. If these are the things that make a horrific regime, these are just our presidents. These are our presidents. These are our last presidents. Our presidents have killed more people than Assad. We've had torture clinics. We've bombed hospitals. We've caused massive amounts of pretty much an exodus from that country. I don't understand how you're willing to say this about Assad, but you give us a pass. I don't get that. I don't get that. And this is not me defending Assad. Assad is a fucking miserable guy. I'm making this point that how are you pointing to somebody else in this way? How can you be this adamant about pointing to somebody else? This guy is a miserable guy and he needs to be taken out of this country in handcuffs and brought before the Hague. And at no point does anybody whisper to Sanders, say, hey, dude, our presidents have done this also. We've done this country. Is anyone going to say that these other countries need to stop supporting America and the things that we do around the world? Why are you being so selective in regards to the other countries? that you're so willing to give yourself a pass. Mainstream news annoys the shit out of me. It's as if this never took place. It's as if this never took place. It's completely unacknowledged. If you're talking on the media and you're having a conversation, we don't do anything wrong. We're blameless. This is the same media that fomented that war in the first place, that killed upwards of 1 million Iraqis. But now, it's as if it never happened. It never took place. There is no history but the present. In America, it's just fucking awesome in everything it does around the world. The idea that anybody can get on one of these shows and point a finger at any other country is amazing to me. It's amazing to me. And at no point do they look at their own actions to see how their actions inspire actions in other countries. They don't look at it. It's oblivious to them. They look at it as that country is doing something that we don't like that country to do. A, that's none of your goddamn business. It's a country, it can do whatever it wants. And two, it's very possible that you're doing something to inspire the behavior in that country. The point I'm making is, yes, we're inspiring certain behaviors in other countries. These guys don't bring that up. They don't acknowledge it. They act as if it doesn't exist. That's amazing to me. It's mind-blowing to me. It annoys the shit out of me. I feel like this country has, it's like no concept of the rest of the world. And when you're looking at why this country has no concept of the rest of the world, it's shit like this. It's shit like this. This image, this mythical image of this country doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. The 1950s weren't fucking awesome. The United States doesn't do everything right everywhere else in the world. We fuck up. And not just fuck up. We do it for bad ends. A lot. We're not in Iraq to liberate Iraqis. We're not in Syria because we care about the Syrians. Be honest. I get annoyed with these news shows when they're saying this stuff. They're spouting this stuff as if they're on some kind of pedestal. I'm missing that pedestal. I'm missing that pedestal. This king has no clothes. Ultimately, they're saying this stuff. And if anybody with even an 8-year memory span, hell, 15-year memory span, can poke holes and say, well, dude, wait a minute, we did the same thing. We did the same thing. How are we pointing fingers? We did the same thing. It's amazing to me.
Senator, Arab leaders and former Obama administration officials applauded the strike by President Trump against Assad's forces. They said it was exactly what you're talking about, a way to send a signal to him that what his behavior is unacceptable while not getting the U.S. involved in a quagmire. So I'm not exactly sure why you opposed the strike. Can you help clear it up for us?
That question is amazing. He said, well, the Democrats, the party who you're supporting, the party who, for the most part, you're stomping around the country with, the Obamaites, they actually said it was a great idea. They said it did exactly what you yourself saying that you wanted to accomplish. So why don't you like the strike? I don't understand why you don't like the strike. You didn't like the fact that he did an illegal strike against a country that may have started an escalating war with Russia. You don't like that, Sanders? It's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, and listen, it's not a question of one strike or one big bomb in Afghanistan. What you need is a strategy. And that strategy has got to demand that Russia, which supplies an enormous amount of very sophisticated weaponry to Assad, stop what it's doing. This will require intensive negotiations to tell Russia that they cannot support a dictator who is destroying his entire country. One strike is not going to do very much in that process.
Senator.
You know, the saddest part about this, we were literally trying to undermine that government. And in every situation, Sanders' response seems to be, we need to strenuously tell this other country that they should do something else to help us. We were undermining that government. We were undermining that government. What's her name? Tulsi Gabbard went to Syria. And she came back and blew, if I'm not mistaken, it was Jake Tapper's mind, saying, hey, those kids, they want us to stop sending terrorists over there or stop giving resources to terrorists to undermine that government. So when Sanders is making this case that we need to tell Russia to stop doing X, Y, Z, is Sanders going to tell his own government to stop sending resources and materials, helping those particular people? I don't remember Sanders saying this. Meaning in the last administration, I don't remember Sanders coming out here, making an argument that the U.S. government should stop sending arms and resources to terrorists. He will come out here and strenuously tell Russia that they need to stop doing something. What about your own government? What about your own government? I mean, yes, it's easy to point fingers at Russia. This is plainly apparent. But within the realm of the things that you yourself control, meaning your country, if your country was earnest about how it was functioning in the world, wouldn't the first thing that you would think of is, well, maybe we need to stop what we're doing that's making the situation worse? That seems to be the most natural position in the world, as opposed to trying to tell every other country what they should and shouldn't do. So.
In addition to that Berkeley protest, Democrats across the country yesterday gathered for rallies all over on tax day, calling for President Trump to release the last 10 years of his tax returns and disclose any foreign conflicts of interest. Now, I've heard that many Democratic senators believe that the president's tax returns could be subpoenaed in the course of the Senate Intelligence Committee investigation into Russian meddling in the U.S. election. Do you think his returns should be subpoenaed?
I think the American people need to understand what kind of involvement Trump's business dealings have abroad and what kind of leverage those dealings may have on his policies as president of the United States. They want a president who's going to represent the American people, not his own interests, business interests, which extend all over the world. But, you know, Jake, when you talk about planes, as I think you...
Here's an interesting question. It doesn't matter if it's business interests or ideological interests. Doesn't matter. Meaning, yeah, I don't think Obama was in office. I don't think he had this external business interest that was affecting his behavior. But if you got $1 billion to win the presidency, and once you get in office, it seems like you're giving back to the places who gave you all that money to run. Is there that big of a difference between Trump having a business interest that's affecting his particular opinion in a particular situation, or a president that's leaning a particular way because of business interests giving him money to lean that particular way? In both cases, the guy's being bought. In both cases, the point of the enterprise, the American public, is nowhere to be found. The point I'm making is, yes, Sanders was right. You should see Trump's taxes. You should. If you're going to have a president of the United States, that president should not be beholden to anybody else. Certainly not any kind of entanglements or business interests. By the same token, is Sanders saying that the party that he himself is adjacent to now function in that capacity? Was healthcare for the purpose of healthcare, or was it to protect drug companies and protect health insurers? What I'm getting at is, yes, a Democratic president may not necessarily have those entanglements in that way, but are we really going to pretend that the Democratic Party and the Democratic president functioned in a way that helped the American public? Nobody believes that. You may have a few true believers out there, but there is no situation where you're going to give 95% of the wealth to the top 1% and assert that you're a progressive and that you yourself are functioning for the public that put you in that office. There is no way you can make that case. There's no way you can make that case. The socialist is here making that case. He's making that case, implicit in what he's saying. Because otherwise, you're attacking that other party with something that your party is also doing. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying your party because that's who he's on here at the behest of. He's the outreach coordinator for the Democratic Party. And yet, he's throwing this attack out. We've just had 8 years of Obama. If he's throwing this attack out and he's functioning with the party that's associated with Obama, How are you throwing this attack out? How are you throwing this attack?
You know, tomorrow afternoon, Tom Perez, who's the chair of the Democratic Party, and I will be taking a 9-state tour all across this country to do what I think is absolutely necessary, and that is to
help get people back into the Democratic Party. That's essentially what's taking place. Oh, that's so pathetic. That's so pathetic. I'm going to hop around the country and get those 15 million people, those bright people who realized that this party wasn't doing them any good, wasn't working in their favor, and for the most part was just scamming them and using them. I'm going to get those people back into the party using the leverage of my credibility to launder the image of whatever Democrat I'm standing beside. That's sad. That's immensely sad. I would have even said that. And I get it. He's going to go through with this shaming event. So yeah, I guess he has to say it on the news, but that's sad to watch. That's immensely sad to watch.
help revitalize American democracy. So many of our people are giving up on the political process. It is very frightening. In the last presidential election, when Trump won, we had the lowest voter turnout in 20 years. And in the previous 2 years before that, in the midterm election, we had the lowest voter turnout in 70 years. And I think what's happening is the middle class shrinks as people perceive that the media and Congress is not hearing their pain about a declining standard of living, income and wealth inequality, not being able to afford to send their kids to college. They're giving up on the political process. And we cannot allow that to happen. So Tom and I are going to be going all over this country. We're going to be fighting to see that the Democratic Party becomes a 50-state party. You can't just be a West Coast party and an East Coast party.
Mm-hmm. You know, when he was defining this kind of problem, he was like, yes, these people aren't voting because they think that the middle class, for the most part, the middle class believes that these parties aren't hearing us. The parties don't hear you. They believe that the media and that all these other institutions of government, for the most part, has turned a deaf ear to their plight and their struggle. Continue on. Continue, Sanders. So I'm going to hop around the country with Tom Perez. Those two things don't line up with one another. What do you believe that Tom Perez is going to do to address any of that? What do you think he's going to do to address any of that? What do you think he's going to do for income inequality? Automation issues. Tell me, socialists. Tell me. You're working with the Democratic Party. What is your Democratic Party going to do to deal with the issues that we're going to confront in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Whether those issues, climate change, ecological damage is a real thing. I don't care what Donald Trump says. For that matter, automation or disruptive technologies. What is you and the Democratic Party going to do when hundreds of thousands of taxi workers have lost their jobs because you have automated cars? What are you going to do? What's your policy? What's your strategy? You honestly believe that Tom Perez is the guy that you want in your corner to deal with issues like this? Okay, fair enough.
And we need a bottom-up party, a grassroots party, which is prepared to stand up to the big money interests, which have so much influence over the political and economic development of our country.
Well, let's talk about that. Kansas and Georgia are red states. You're on this red state tour that's going to kick off tomorrow. But just this week, a Democrat you supported lost an election for a special House seat election in Kansas. A Democratic candidate, John Ossoff, is seeking to fill in Georgia a seat vacated by the now Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary Dr. Tom Price in Georgia. Are you concerned that the DNC, they're doing this big red state tour with you, but a lot of people criticized the DNC for not sending enough resources to Kansas. So it's great that they're doing this display.
Let's be clear.
Good question, Tapper. Good question. I'm curious about this answer. I want to hear this. So Tapper is essentially saying he's making my critique, but granted, he's asking the question. I just kind of make the assertion or the critique itself. Yes, they're parading around the country with you, Sanders. Yes, they're doing that. They're okay to glad hand and be in front of a camera with you. But are you concerned that the fact that they didn't give any support to that particular guy who you were backing, are you concerned that ultimately all of this is just optics? They want to be near you, but they don't want anything to do with you. It's like we like the talk of the poor, but we don't like the smell of them. That's essentially what this looks like. It's, yes, they want to be seen with you, but they don't want what you're selling. That's a good question. Let's hear what Sanders has to say.
Yeah, let's
go
be
ahead.
clear. I mean, the point here is that I think all over grassroots America, whether they're Democrats, independents, or Republicans, people are perceiving that Trump did not tell the truth in his campaign in terms of what he would do as president of the United States. He was going to drain the swamp. Well, he's in fact appointed more billionaires to his cabinet than any president in history, et cetera, et cetera. So what I think has happened now in Kansas, it is true that the Democratic candidate lost. It is true that the Democratic Party should have put more resources into that election. But it is also true that he ran 20 points better than the Democratic candidate for president did in Kansas. So what you're seeing in Kansas, what you're seeing in Georgia, I believe you're going to see it in Montana. I believe you're going to see it all over this country.
Yeah, that's irrelevant. That's completely irrelevant. That's not what you were asked. What he asked you was, is it possible that these guys want to be near you without necessarily taking that particular path, that progressive direction? Sanders immediately went to, well, yeah, but this guy, Donald Trump, lied. Okay, but what does that have to do with your party not towing your line, or your party using you, or the party that you're affiliated with using you? Those are different things. I'm asking you, are you being used? You're telling me about Donald Trump. And then to take the second thing of, this guy ran 20 points higher than the other candidate. That's great. That's not what you were asked. That's not what you were asked. Is it possible that your party just wants to be near you without parroting and actually doing anything substantively to back up the things that you yourself are saying? Yes, we agree that you're progressive. No, I don't agree that they are. And we are looking for cues to give us this idea on whether or not the party is going to go in a particular direction. Even Tapper, he's on CNN, and he's like, is it possible you're being used by that party? They don't seem to, be backing you up in these situations. Even Jake Tapper could see it. That's amazing. Just amazing. Sanders doesn't want to answer that question because Sanders knows the answer to that question.
Is that many so-called red states, working people are going to wake up and say, wait a second, Republicans want to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and education, and they want to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the top 1%. No, that's not what we elected Trump to do.
And here we are again. Here we are again. They want to give millions in tax breaks. They want to cut Social Security, and they want to cut Medicare. Now, to be fair, I haven't heard a Democrat say anything about Medicare. So let's cross that off the list. Bill Clinton was going to privatize Social Security. If it wasn't for that blowjob with Monica Lewinsky, Social Security would be privatized. Right now, he had a deal with Newt Gingrich to do so. People who were in Hillary Clinton's camp wanted to privatize Social Security. Whether she would have did it or not, I don't know. But there were people in her camp that wanted to do it. That's not purely a Republican thing. So, again, somebody tapped Sanders on the shoulder and said, dude, shh, your party was also doing that. If I'm not mistaken, Obama had talked about cutting Social Security in that grand bargain. So the last two Republican Democratic presidents were going to cut or privatize Social Security. The upcoming president had people in her office that may have did the same thing. Is that really what we're bringing up as a point of contention? And as for giving all billions or millions to billionaires and millionaires, the party that you yourself are affiliated with right now, the last president, he was in office for 8 years. There's a very recent record of his behavior and his actions in that office. He enshrined 80 to 90% of Bush tax cuts into law. That is literally what you're talking about here and tarring Trump with. The guy in the party that you're supporting did the same thing. Not to mention, not even tax breaks. If you're just talking about revenue in general, 95% of that wealth went to the top 1%. That's the party you're supporting, Sanders. Just be aware. I understand you want to throw these things out at Trump, The point I'm making to you is, these parties, Pepsi, Coke, it's not that much of a difference where you can stand on TV and lob bricks at them and full well not realize that those bricks can be lobbed right back at the party who you're standing beside. That's all I'm saying. It's hard to hear you make these cases when you're attached to somebody else who those cases apply. That's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, climate change is real. It's not a hoax.
Let's talk about climate change. Let's talk about climate change. Sanders brought it up. Let's talk about it. You have one party who says it doesn't exist. So right off the bat, they don't have a conflict. They have no conflict of interest. Yes, their subordinate reality will be destroyed by that real reality of climate change. But from a conceptual perspective, there is no conflict. We don't have to do anything about this because it doesn't exist. Democrats, on the other hand, are in a dicier position. Because if you say, I believe the science, I believe that climate change is a threat, I believe these warnings these scientists are putting out saying that we are destroying our ecology, all right, then what's the logical course of action if you believe that? I mean, if you really believe that there's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet, are you getting into your rocket ship and are you going to do something about it? Or are you just going to let the comet hit you? Now, if you don't believe really that there's a comet, if you're just looking up saying, yeah, I see a comet, I really see a comet, I believe there's a comet. But if you're not doing anything about it, why do I believe that you actually believe there's a comet? If you're going to say, I believe in the science of climate change, there are certain concrete actions that would need to be taken to try to avert it. If you can avert it at all. The point is, those actions give you a better environment regardless. It gives you a better environment regardless. That looks like that will be the policy regardless. The problem is, the person who you supported, Bernie Sanders, in the last election, was trying to spread fracking all across the world, or at the very least was selling it out to the State Department. How can you get on the channel? I mean, this is what I mean. How are you telling me about this green energy revolution and how climate change is catastrophic and it's going to destroy the planet? But I supported a candidate who was essentially using a means of extracting oil that pumped massive amounts of methane into the atmosphere. If you're affiliated with the party, you're held to the things that the party does. You can't just absolve yourself of everything that this machine does. You're a company man at this point. You have to own it.
Got to move to sustainable energy. I think all over this country, in red states and in blue states, people are beginning to stand up. They're beginning to fight back. They're demanding a government which does not just represent the billionaires, but represents the working class of this country.
Senator, I want to ask you about this horrific incident last week in which a passenger was dragged off a United flight after refusing to give up his seat voluntarily. Democratic Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky of Illinois, she's planning to introduce legislation that would ban airlines from being able to involuntarily bump passengers from flights. Airlines say that this kind of congressional meddling could result in much higher fares for consumers. What do you think Congress should do?
Well, I think anybody who flies a lot, and as a United States Senator, I fly a lot, knows how dysfunctional in many respects the airlines are. They know that there are many, many delays that are caused not because of weather, but because of inappropriate practices on the part of the airlines. This overbooking, which caused this particular problem, is not unique. I've been on airlines many, many times where people have been asked to leave. And I think what we do need is to take...
Let's go a little deeper than that. That's a shallow answer. I mean, granted, it's the answer that he's going to give. It's a news show. They don't necessarily delve into context. The problem is capitalism. The problem is capitalism. That's grandiose. That's expansive. The problem is capitalism. You have a situation where for-profit enterprise determine that it can make more money by getting rid of a particular person that's on their airplane so they can stick in their people to get across the country. Yes, they could have made a different choice. They could have found another way to get those people over. But it was about dollars and cents. They were incentivized to get that guy out of his seat. Their problem was the means that they used to get that guy out of his seat caused a kickback. Now, they could have found many of ways to get those people to where they needed to go. They didn't necessarily have to screw with this particular guy. That guy paid his money for a seat like everybody else. It was his seat. The airline had no right at all to take him out of his seat, let alone abuse him and drag him out of the airplane in such a way. Those people are incentivized to behave that way. Those thugs that did it are incentivized to behave that way by the profit that people are putting in their pockets. They are paid goons in the same way that they... And look, I'm making this point that each person along the way in that process has been incentivized towards a particular behavior. The behavior that gives them the most bang for their buck. The workers themselves are the ones who drag those people out, cops or something. But they are being paid for that service. They didn't do it willy-nilly. The airline itself felt that they can make more money. It was more profitable to get those people across town using that particular plane. Again, they could have found other ways to do it. It was dollars and cents to them. All of this stuff was boiled down to a profit motive. It's profit motive. He's a democratic socialist, so I don't expect him to go balls out attacking capitalism on the news show. I'm just making this point that it goes beyond they overbooked it. Why did they overbook it? Why? It was profitable. The incentive allowed them, or the incentive pushes them to take a particular behavior. And each step along the way, in this particular process, that behavior was based off somebody getting paid and somebody saving money. Unfortunately, they got caught and they were on video.
Take a hard look at the airlines in this country and make them much more responsive to the consumers than they currently are in terms of pricing. I mean, you could have two people on an airline, one's paying twice as much as another person. So the idea of taking a hard look at airline travel, and by the way, the consolidation of ownership in the airline industry is something that I think would be a very useful effort.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, thank you so much. Have fun and good luck.
Look, man, I love Sanders. I hate seeing him in this role. I really do. I honestly do. Like, it's difficult to watch him in this role. It's one thing if he's functioning as an independent, and he's separate and distinct from the other parties. He's his own thing. He's judged by himself. He's not towing the line for anybody else at this point. You either have a black mark against him for something he's done, or nothing at all. But in this particular case, the party that he's functioning with has a lot of black marks against him. Meaning, if you've allied yourself with this group, you're arm in arm, any stones that get thrown at them are also going to get thrown at you because you're functioning with this group. You're telling people that this is your team, that these are the people who you've affiliated yourself with. You're lobbing this stuff out as if you're just an independent. You're a Democrat. I'm sorry. You're functioning as a Democrat. So, like I said, it's hard to watch these interviews with him in it. It's always this thing of, yeah, dude, if you believe that, why are you functioning with the party that also, why you function with the party that also toes that particular line or is susceptible to that particular criticism? It's just difficult to watch. All right, guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to write, subscribe, and share. Thanks, guys. Oh, and you can always support the work through Patreon. Look it out.